This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise. This week, President Trump is taking his show on the road. And Gregg Carlstrom, from over at The Economist, he's got a front row seat.
I'm in Riyadh right now, following Donald Trump around on the first leg of his trip in the Middle East.
By Friday, Trump will have spent time in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Gregg says it's hard to overstate how thrilled Middle Eastern leaders are to host the president.
I mean, there was competition. So he's coming for 4 days and 3 nights, and everyone wanted to host him for 2 nights. Everyone wanted to have him for an extra night. And so there was a lot of back and forth trying to figure out, who would win in the schedule in that way. In the end, he's spending 1 night in each country so that he doesn't offend anyone.
Yeah, I was struck by how comfortable Saudi Arabia seemed to want to make Trump. I was seeing that there's actually a mobile McDonald's, on site for the president, theoretically, which seemed like, wow, that's a real, knowing the person you're talking to kind of moment.
It is. I think they get what makes him tick.
Maybe you remember Donald Trump's last state visit to this region. This was during his first term. Like now, Saudi Arabia was chosen to receive Trump before any other ally. But Gregg says there was this problem back in 2017. It was unclear what the president wanted out of this journey, other than pomp and circumstance. The enduring image from that initial visit is of Trump and the Saudi king and the Egyptian president, all looming over a glowing orb. To what end? No one seemed to know. This time around, it's clear what the president wants: money. And his hosts in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere, they seem happy to oblige.
I mean, months before he came, the Crown Prince said, I'm going to announce $600 billion of trade and investment with the United States over the next 4 years. It's a really impressive sounding number. It's also a completely nonsensical number. That's $150 billion a year over 4 years. That's something like 15% of Saudi's gross domestic product. It's 6 times bigger than the current balance of trade between the two countries. There's no way Saudi Arabia is going to come up with $150 billion a year of trade and investment with the U.S. But for Trump, that doesn't matter. Whether that materializes or not is almost irrelevant. He gets a good headline that he can tout after 6 weeks of mostly bad, self-inflicted economic headlines. And that's what he's here for. That's what he's after.
You know what's notable to me about this trip? It's notable where Trump is not going, namely Jerusalem or Israel at all. Did that surprise you too?
It would have in any other administration. He did go there, for example, in his first term in 2017. He came to Saudi Arabia, but then he stopped in Israel on the way back. But going to Israel right now doesn't really offer him things that he can sell to supporters back home. He's going to end up arguing with Netanyahu about a ceasefire in Gaza or a hostage deal in Gaza. He's not going to get any big economic announcements out of it. And so it just doesn't fit with what this Trump White House in this moment is looking for.
Today on the show, what Donald Trump has gone to the Middle East to achieve. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today? Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices, and that's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies, so you can save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states and situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the U.S. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a U.S.-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
As we talked about, this tour of the Gulf is Trump's first trip abroad since re-entering office, which seems notable. What are his top-line hopes about what he wants to get out of this trip?
I think for Trump, it's pretty straightforward. He wants economic announcements. He wants to be able to say, I have secured X trillion dollars of pledges from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. All of this money is going to pour into the United States. It's going to create X million jobs over the next 4 years. That's what he wants. And that's what Gulf leaders realize. And that's what they're trying to offer him. I think the leaders that he's meeting with have their own interests and their own priorities, and they have some geopolitical issues that they really want to press Trump on. But I think for the president, this really is focused on trying to get some good economic news.
It seems notable to me that it was just a couple weeks back that Trump's children were in the same region. They were announcing all kinds of investment, hotels, golf courses, and I know that at least the UAE is very invested in crypto associated with Trump. It just seems like, in a way, that trip, there's no way to think of it as not entangled with this trip.
Of course. And, when you speak to business people in the Gulf, when you speak to officials in the Gulf, they're pretty honest about the fact that they know if you want to curry favor with Donald Trump, one way that you do that is by making deals with his family, with his business associates. So as you say, the sons were here doing various property and crypto deals. In years past, before Trump was even reelected, governments like the government of Qatar have had a lot of business dealings with Steve Witkoff, his Middle East envoy. They recognize that this is the way to Trump's heart.
Ahead of this trip, the biggest headline was about the plane that Qatar was theoretically considering gifting Trump with the idea that, it can serve as Air Force One. It's had a lot of blowback here in the U.S. because it's just such a transactional idea of, this huge gift from a country. How has it played out on the ground there?
Well, I don't think on the ground here anyone is that surprised or that scandalized by it, because it is just sort of the way governments in the region do business. Apparently, this isn't even the first time Qatar has gifted a plane to a head of state. I think they've done that with a few other presidents over the years, the former president of Yemen being one example. The Qatari prime minister flew to Yemen on a visit, ended up leaving his plane behind as a gift to the Yemeni president. So they do this sort of thing.
That just seems so old school. That seems like something you'd read about in a fairy tale of like how kings and queens operated.
This is why, typically they haven't done this sort of thing with American presidents, because there would be, various legal and ethical restraints that might prevent the American presidents from accepting. But apparently there are no such restraints right now.
Is it worth articulating some of the non-financial goals the Trump administration has going into this series of meetings in the Middle East? What are those?
I think the two biggest issues on the agenda, certainly the ones that Gulf leaders want to talk about with Trump, are Gaza and Iran. On Gaza, it barely needs repeating that everyone in the Middle East wants to see a ceasefire, wants to see the war end. And Trump is going to hear that message very clearly from the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis. Whether he will then turn around after that and put pressure on Netanyahu to end the war remains to be seen. We're just not sure if he's going to do that. But that is one thing on the agenda. The other big issue, Iran, big difference from Trump's first term, is that Gulf countries all now support a new nuclear deal between the United States and Iran.
Didn't they want Trump to pull out in 2017?
They did. They were some of the main forces sort of whispering in his ear in his first term, telling him that the JCPOA, the deal Obama negotiated, was a terrible deal. You should abandon it. You should scrap it. They have come to regret that.
So what changed?
Well, reality changed. They've come to regret it because where are we now? Iran is closer than it's ever been to a nuclear weapon. It's enriched uranium to within a hair's breadth of weapons grade. It has enough that if it makes the decision to go that final step and enrich to weapons grade, it could produce 6 nuclear bombs worth of uranium within a relatively short period of time.
And I guess that's a threat to the whole region.
It's a threat to the whole region. That's certainly how it's seen here. And so they want America to get back into a deal, even if it ends up looking very much like the old deal, like the JCPOA. They want America to negotiate a deal that will try and reimpose some constraints on Iran's nuclear program.
You know, Syria is also in the mix here. Just a few hours before we got on the line, it was announced that Trump might be adding on a visit with Syria's new president. What does Syria want?
Well, what Syria wants, actually in the last hour or so on Tuesday evening, Syria got. Syria wants the lifting of American sanctions. Syria wants all of these sanctions that have been accumulated over decades, not just sanctions that were imposed on the Assad regime during the war, but going back to the 1970s. Syria wants all of these removed. Trump, in his speech on Tuesday evening in Riyadh, said he was going to do just that. He said he had ordered the cessation of all sanctions on Syria. Now, we have to see what that means in practice once the White House puts out a more detailed statement on this. But if you take Trump at his word, America is going to lift these sanctions, which gives Syria an opportunity to start raising money for reconstruction, to start reconnecting, its banking sector with the rest of the world, to start buying oil legally instead of having to smuggle it in on unlicensed tankers that are carrying sanctioned Russian crude oil.
This all seems really essential to recovering from the Assad regime. Like, you can't be a country without these things.
Exactly. And you have governments, particularly in the Gulf, like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, that are interested in putting money into Syria for reconstruction. They think that stabilizing Syria is in everyone's interest, and they're willing to put some money behind that. But they haven't been able to do that until now because of these American sanctions, which make it almost impossible to invest, to transfer money, to do any kind of business with Syria. So if Trump follows through on this, if he gets these sanctions out of the way, there's a good chance that money starts flowing in and things finally start getting rebuilt in Syria.
It's interesting, just talking to you, you can really get the sense of how money is really important to make all of these deals, even if they're also about foreign policy work. So what is it reasonable to expect out of this trip, given that the war in Gaza is still ongoing and many people in these countries in the Middle Eastern region have strong feelings about what's going on there?
I think there are some things that are possible and there are some things that are impossible. Obviously, as we've seen a change in American policy towards Syria, that happens independently of the Gaza war. A deal with Iran, I don't expect a major breakthrough on a deal this week, but the Gulf states are going to talk to Trump about ways that they can help incentivize Iran to join a new nuclear agreement. That can happen regardless of a ceasefire. But I think, aside from wanting to end the war and needing to end the war in its own right, because it is just a horrible and pointless war at this point, the sort of broader regional diplomacy that both Trump and Biden tried to pursue, normalizing ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and then perhaps normalizing them between Syria and Israel, Lebanon and Israel, some sort of a broader regional rapprochement and peace agreement. You're not going to make any progress on that as long as the Gaza war is ongoing. And I think Trump, in his speech in Riyadh, he sort of made that clear. He mentioned wanting Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords to recognize Israel. But he said, you'll do it in your own time.
But it will be a special day in the Middle East with the whole world watching when Saudi Arabia joins us. And you'll be greatly honoring me, and you'll be greatly honoring all of those people that have fought so hard for the Middle East. And I really think it's going to be something special. But you'll do it in your own time. And that's what I want. And that's what you want. And that's the way it's going to be. When I left office, the only thing...
And then he didn't say anything else about Israel.
The Abraham Accords was the agreement that was brokered by Jared Kushner back in Trump's first term.
Correct. And it saw 4 Arab countries, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and the UAE, all recognize Israel, establish ties with Israel. And, everyone, both Biden and Trump, wanted Saudi Arabia to join those accords as well. But I think Trump, by saying, sort of take your time with this, he's recognizing reality, which is that the Saudis, with a war raging in Gaza, with a far-right government in power in Israel, the Saudis are not in any position right now to normalize with Israel, and it can't happen until things change in Israel.
After the break, as Donald Trump moves closer to the Gulf, is he also tiptoeing away from Israel? This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's smart to always have a few financial goals, and here's a really smart one you can set: earning cash back on what you buy every day. With Discover, you can. Get this. Discover automatically matches all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Seriously, all of it. Discover trusts you to make smart decisions. After all, you listen to this podcast. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
Most of our media are owned by a handful of tech billionaires, but there's one place that still operates like the internet was never invented. On the new season of The Divided Dial from On the Media, we're exploring shortwave radio, where prayer and propaganda coexist with news and conspiracy theories, and where an existential battle for the public airwaves is playing out right now. Listen to On the Media wherever you get your podcasts.
As I said at the top, Israel is notably not on the itinerary for the president's trip. But that didn't stop Trump from making headlines there on his way to the region. The day before he was set to leave for the Middle East, news broke that Hamas was releasing Idan Alexander, the last living American hostage held in Gaza since October 7th. Gregg says that timing is probably not a coincidence.
I think Hamas, by doing this, the official statement that they put out was, we didn't get anything in return for this. We are releasing Alexander as a goodwill gesture to Donald Trump, to the Americans. I don't think they would have just given away their last hostage with American citizenship, which they see as a very valuable point of leverage. I don't think they would have given that away for nothing in return. And so I do think there were discussions about whether Trump was going to make a renewed effort to get to a ceasefire in Gaza. It's something that he was very engaged in during the transition before he took office, but he seemed to lose interest in over the past few months. Everyone I've spoken to in Washington and in Israel says he just hasn't been that engaged because there are trade wars to fight and he's been preoccupied with other things. But he's coming to the Middle East. That's going to refocus his attention, at least temporarily, on the region. Hamas releases this hostage, which will obviously get his attention and buy them perhaps a bit of credit with Trump. And I think they are certainly hoping that they can build from that into some kind of a ceasefire deal.
And notably, this all happened because the U.S. was in direct talks with Hamas, which seems like a big deal to me because for a year and a half, we've seen these talks that are a triangle of people. You have Hamas, you have the U.S., and you have Israel. And it just seems like the U.S. cut Israel out?
It's not the first time that they've cut Israel out in recent months. If you think about what's happened over the past 6 weeks, starting with when Netanyahu made his second visit to Washington, he was sitting in the Oval Office next to Trump, and Trump announced that the US and Iran were going to start nuclear negotiations. Netanyahu looked like he was completely taken by surprise by that announcement. Then a month later, Trump announcing that the military campaign against the Houthis in Yemen was being suspended. The Israelis were taken completely unaware by that, and they weren't part of the truce agreement between America and the Houthis. There wasn't a provision in there that said the Houthis would stop firing missiles at Israel. Indeed, they've continued doing that over the past week. So there was another break between America and Israel. Then the Eitan Alexander announcement, which the Israelis didn't know about these direct talks between Israel and Hamas. They eventually found out through their own intelligence services who were spying on Hamas, but they didn't find out from the Americans. So we're seeing a pattern now where Trump has his own sense of what America's interests are in the region. And when they don't align with Israel's interests, he seems increasingly willing to just go over Netanyahu's head.
It was interesting to me, too, that Trump's special envoy for hostage response, he flew to Israel with Eitan Alexander's mother in advance of her son's release. And he actually addressed the flight they were on, like he got on the pilot's overhead mic and basically made this little speech saying, you know, President Trump, he told me to get every hostage, every Israeli. He wasn't kidding. And I want you to know that.
We're going after every single hostage that there exists in all of Israel. We're coming for them all. Because the bond of Israel and the bond of the United States have never been stronger. We're two countries that are very close, and the president cares very much about all of you. So I am here. I'm getting the hostages back, but I'm not going to rest until they are all home. Every single one of them. Thank you, guys.
Which seemed like engineered to get people excited about Trump, but then did not mention Netanyahu. Like, this was clearly not a win for Israel's government. It was being put forward as a win for Israeli people, brought to you by Donald Trump. Is that how it struck you too?
It's not just how it struck me. That's, this idea of Trump being the one who has sympathy and support for the hostages and not Netanyahu. That is how the families of the hostages feel. I was in Tel Aviv about a month ago now, and I spent a few hours one afternoon in Hostage Square, which is this plaza outside the Art Museum in Tel Aviv, where some of the families have set up a permanent protest encampment. And you talk to people there and they say, Trump, Steve Witkoff, his Middle East envoy, various other people in the administration, when they have met with the families of hostages, they seem genuinely moved by their plight. They seem genuinely concerned with the well-being of the hostages. And then you ask them, what about your meetings with the Israeli government? And there's none of that. They are incredibly critical of an Israeli government that seems to have forsaken their relatives. So they already feel like, if anyone is going to take an interest in the plight of the hostages, it's the American president, not the Israeli prime minister.
This just seems like an interesting game that's playing out, where the Trump administration seems to be actively sidelining Netanyahu. Notably, I think after this release, the Israeli government announced, okay, we're going to get back into negotiations. It seemed to be playing catch up. I guess I wonder what you think the next few months will look like. Is this a move engineered to change Netanyahu's behavior? Do we even know?
If you don't put pressure on Netanyahu, you're not going to change Netanyahu's behavior. I think him re-engaging with these ceasefire talks a little bit this week, sending a Mossad delegation to Qatar for negotiations, for Netanyahu, the end goal of that is still the same. He's fine with a short-term truce that releases some more of the remaining hostages. He is not okay with permanently ending the war in Gaza. So he hasn't changed on these issues. The question in the coming days, weeks, months is, will Trump force him to change? Israel cannot continue this war without American support, military, economic, diplomatic. Netanyahu himself can't defy Trump. If Trump tells him you need to end the war, Netanyahu has spent years building Donald Trump up as Israel's greatest defender in the West. He can't turn around and defy him if Trump tells him to agree to a ceasefire. So will Trump do that? Will he apply the kind of pressure on Netanyahu that Joe Biden failed to apply throughout the final year of his presidency? Will he do that? Will he not? If he does, the war can end.
So looking at this week, do you feel like Donald Trump and his administration have a vision for the Middle East right now?
I think they tell you that they have a vision. I think they can articulate something that looks like a vision of, a region that sets aside its old conflicts, and America makes a deal with Iran, Saudi makes a deal with Iran, everybody makes deals with each other, and we can move on from conflict and have a glorious new future of economic development, which sounds great on paper, also sounds in some ways not unlike what some past American presidents have suggested. I think the question is whether they've thought through the details of, on Iran, for example. America wants a deal with Iran. Great. That's a laudable goal. What does that deal look like? Does it allow Iran to continue enriching uranium or not? It doesn't seem like the Trump administration has made a decision. In fact, Trump himself said last week that there was no decision on that. There's been a ton of infighting about what this new nuclear deal with Iran should look like. And that has repeated itself across other issues as well. Trump lifting sanctions or announcing that he's going to lift sanctions on Syria, that comes after months of a much more hardline policy on Syria that was driven by some of the hawks in his administration who thought the new Syrian government can't be trusted. So there's still this big ideological schism between, call them the neocons and the isolationists in the Trump administration. And I think until you definitively resolve that ideological battle, there's a concern that the Middle East policy might keep seesawing the way it has.
The devil is in the details seems to me to be the through line of the Trump administration.
Always, with everything, whether it's negotiating with Iran, whether it's tariffs, with everything.
Gregg, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for making the time to come on the show.
Thank you.
Gregg Carlstrom is the Middle East correspondent for The Economist. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige, Osburn, Elena, Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Madeline, Ducharme, Ethan Oberman, and Isabel Angell. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go check me out on Blue Sky. Say, hey, I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
In honor of Military Appreciation Month, Verizon thought of a lot of different ways we could show our appreciation, like rolling out the red carpet, giving you your own personal marching band, or throwing a bumping shindig. At Verizon, we're doing all that in the form of special military offers. That's why, this month only, we're giving military and veteran families a $200 Verizon gift card and a phone on us with a select trade-in and a new line on select unlimited plans. Think of it as our way of flying a squadron of jets overhead while launching fireworks. Now that's what we call a celebration, because we're proud to serve you. Visit your local Verizon store to learn more. $200 Verizon gift card requires smartphone purchase $799.99 or more with new line on eligible plan. Gift card sent within 8 weeks after receipt of claim. Phone offer requires $799.99 purchase with new smartphone line on Unlimited Ultimate or Postpaid Unlimited Plus. Minimum plan $80 a month with autopay plus taxes and fees for 36 months. Less $800 trade-in or promo credit applied over 36 months. 0% APR. Trade-in must be from Apple, Google, or Samsung. Trade-in and additional terms apply.